Well, Merry Christmas, everybody, and thank you for being with me today for our devotion. We are in Psalm 142. I also want to quickly remind everyone that on Christmas Eve this year, December 24, Christmas Eve, we will have our two candlelight Christmas Eve worship services lasting 60 minutes each, no more than that. One will be at 3 o'clock. The other will be at 5 o'clock. So 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock, no childcare, two Christmas Eve candlelight services. We'll also be ringing the bell as you come to the services so you can make a donation to the Salvation Army. So that's this year at Christmas Eve. Psalm 142 has the heading, after a prayer for help in trouble, a maskil of David when he was in the cave, a prayer. And the word maskil there means, well, it can have two ideas. One is that this is a psalm where David is summarizing, teaching, if you will, lessons that he has learned through life and his experience with God. Or it can also refer to a type of musical instrument they would play when they would sing this psalm as a part of worship. And in the cave, this psalm comes from, there were two experiences in the books of 1 Samuel 24, and I believe the other is 1 Samuel 22, when David was hiding from King Saul, who was trying to kill him, in caves. And so he wrote this in one of those two experiences, two caves. Devotionally, what spoke to me was just David's heart, his spirit, when he was praying and talking to God about his problems and wanting God to help him. David was direct with God. He was honest with God, but always from a place of respect, a place of reverence, a place of faith, a place of devotion. Sometimes people are really blunt and honest with God from a place of anger, place of frustration, resentment, place of blame. Not David. When David was honest with God, he was also expressing devotion to God. And you'll see that in this psalm. Look with me starting at verse 1. He says, I cry aloud with my voice to the Lord. I make supplication with my voice to the Lord. I pour out my complaint before him. I declare my trouble before him. In other words, he's honest with God, and he speaks it to God. Verse 3, when my spirit was overwhelmed within me, when it's hard for me to hold up under all of it. It's just like flood waves coming at me. He said, when that was going on, God, you knew my path and the way where I walk. He's not saying God determined all this. God determined the direction of his walk. What he's saying is, when I was going through all of this, God knew. God knew. And when I was talking to God, I wasn't telling God anything new. I was not telling God anything he did not already know, because God knew, saw, watched. He knew my path, the trail that I traveled. He knew where I walked, the path, the way I walked. And so when we're having troubles and we talk to God, remember, God already knows. So does that mean we're not supposed to tell God? No. We still talk to God. God, this is going on in my life. This is happening. I'm struggling with this, even though God already knows all that. Not simply or primarily because it's therapeutic, even though there's some truth to that, but it's because we are honest in our relationship with God, and he is honest with us, and we have honest dialogue. So when you are phony, when you play games, when you pretend with God, you don't honor God and you don't help yourself. So honesty, because that's the type of relationship we have with him. But look at verse 5. Verse 5. He says, I cried out to you, O Lord. I said, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. So this whole time he's having honest conversation with God about the difficulties of his life. He's also acknowledging to God what he genuinely feels, where he genuinely is spiritually. Even though he's hurting and he's wanting God's intervention, he's very clear that God, you are my refuge. As I go through this, the refuge, refuge is like a hiding place, a place of safety, so to speak. He says, God, as I'm going through all of this, and I'm being honest with you, you yourself are my resting place, my safe place, my hiding place. You are my refuge. You are my portion in the land of the living. Think of it like here's all these acres of land, and this person owns that portion, and another person owns that portion, and you own this portion. What David says, in the land of all the living, God, you are my portion. You're my dwelling place. So he's coming from a place of devotion, a place of faith, even though he's being very, very honest with God. And that's how we're supposed to be. Not angry and resentful, but with devotion, but yet very, very honest with God. Verse 6. He says, God, give heed to my cry, for I am brought very low. Deliver me from my persecutors, for they are too strong for me. Saul and his army, wow, God, that's a big enemy. Would you deliver me, the Lord? So he makes his request. But I want you to notice something. He doesn't demand anything of God. He asks. He asks. He makes a request. He doesn't demand. So with God, he's our refuge. We are devoted to him. We trust in him, and he's our peace through the hardest of days. And we ask him, we share with God very honestly, God, this is hurting. God, this is happening. And God, this is what I would like for you to do. And God gives us peace. And sometimes God answers that prayer and delivers us. Sometimes God answers that prayer in a way we don't expect. Sometimes he answers that prayer by taking us to heaven. But we always speak honestly with God, but from a place of trust and love. And we ask, we don't demand. Listen, God is not someone to be manipulated. One of my biggest issues with the so-called prosperity gospel preachers and teaching is that we can wrap God around our little finger and twist God to do whatever we want. If we just have enough faith, if we just do this, we can manipulate God. I'm going to tell you something. Somebody who loves and walks with Jesus Christ never demands of Jesus, never manipulates Jesus. We love him and we ask. And we ask with great faith, with great faith. But faith is not something we use to manipulate Jesus. Faith shows our devotion to, our confidence in, and our trust in, so that when he chooses to answer those prayers the way we want, great. When he doesn't, our faith is still real, and we're rewarded in other ways. But we never, never manipulate God. People who try that, their faith is shallow, even if they think it's big. Because real faith will submit to the suffering like Jesus did in the garden. Like Paul did when God said, you're going to live with that thorn in the flesh. Something to think about. I'll see you tomorrow as we look at Psalm 133. God bless you, everybody, and Merry Christmas.